Murdoch Park Master Plan update. And development code audit to promote economic development. So, Kristen, I assume you're.
We're doing the fun one. No, they're both fun.
Yes.
So Brett is here from Lingo Hansen to talk to us about Murdoch Park Master Plan. I know you all saw some of the images and we took it to Parks Board last night and received some feedback. So we'll just walk through this. It's actually Rich's project. So Rich is here to answer any questions you might have as well.
So this is when Rich took this project on originally, I was gonna be doing it, and the transition happened in December 1st. Rich actually took this project over, so he's been doing a great job on it, so.
Okay.
Well, without further ado, I'm gonna quickly walk through the presentation. If you have any questions, please let me know. I want to make more time for conversations and questions rather than presentations. So if you have any questions along the way, please let me know. But otherwise, I'll just kind of quickly walk you through what we've done to this date, the feedback that we've gotten, and then I'll walk you through 3 concepts that we've developed as kind of a first attack at the design. So just project background. We've finished up phase 1 site analysis where we took a look at the site and we talked to the public about kind of their how they use the site and the kind of things they would like to see. And so now we're entering to phase 2 where we're developing concept alternatives. The purpose of phase 2 is just to kind of come to a preferred design, which we will then begin to flesh out this summer. Just quickly, some guiding principles that have just fed into each of the designs that we've worked on is we want to provide green solutions, promote health and accessibility, enhance the playing experience, and improve and expand park amenities, and provide elevated park design. And these all came out of the 2021 Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So for the existing site, the main kind of highlight of the park is the pond. It's got a small playground area and a picnic shelter, and then some kind of benches throughout the site. So during the site analysis, I just want to quickly highlight some of the elements of the site that affect each of these concepts. The first of which, through our environmental analysis, it has been determined the pond is in fact a wetland, which therefore requires a 50-foot setback that's vegetated, and that also has requirements on the type of programming that can exist within this zone.
So a natural pond, or was it created just because of the design of the?
Yeah, well, it's actually a detention pond, but originally it was part of a larger creek network. And so that's why the wetland just designation comes into effect. So as well on site in some of these areas on the path, on the pathways, these are problematic areas in terms of they're not up to current code for accessibility. And so they're basically the paths are too steep. Along the edge of the site over here, there is shallow bedrock, and so that's also kind of affect how we approach these designs. So I just wanted to quickly highlight some of those items. So through the first phase of engagement with the Parks Board and the public, some themes came out of this. So people love the natural serene feel of the park. This was really what we heard over and over and over again. And as such, people are very interested in enhancing the pond. So doing things that allow people to interact with the pond are quite popular. Adding a restroom is also a popular item. And in terms of the playground, everyone was on board for upgrading the playground, but they also wanted to take into account the parents and their comfort. So adding seating and protection from the environment.
So have you teeter-totters that are parent sized?
Well, I think that's a good idea too. I think that's the kind of innovation that I'm here for. Talk about benches, but I like that better. A sports court was something that was identified in the master plan, and it was popular with some, but I think quite unpopular with others. So it's a kind of a divisive feature with some support. Except,
Do they visit like a particular style of sport for,
well,
like pickleball, basketball?
yeah, so we had talked about kind of like a half basketball court as an example. And so that was kind of the model that was set forward. Pickleball never came up. It's,
Really?
so.
Well, that's very interesting.
Sorry.
What was our outreach so far? How have we done our outreach so far?
There was a great turnout at the open house. Didn't you have like
Oh, we have.
50, yeah, there was an open house, I'm gonna say 50 people or so?
Yeah.
Oh, nice, okay.
I
Yeah,
think the
right.
discussion at Parks Board last night around this issue centered a lot around. You know, the park is really like a natural, the pond, you know, it's very, and then a sport court could be a very loud. Not on theme with the rest of the park and the way it's kind of natural setting and nature trails and stuff like that.
Two dichotomies there.
I think there's gonna be some interesting ideas coming up in the concept, so.
So. All parks don't have to be the same for everybody, right? We talked about that with the overlook park, you know, let's have a Zen garden or something, you know, anyway.
And it's also important to understand, to take into account the parks nearby. So there is Snyder Park not too far away.
Yeah, so. And then eventually there'll be a park with, I think, a sport court across.
Yes, and we did
Yeah,
talk about that
Yeah, with
last night.
basketball.
Yeah, that's it yesterday.
Oh, right.
Accessibility was acknowledged as important. And the final point was be mindful of the informal ways the park is used. So something that was brought up was that when the weather allows, that people really enjoy using the park for sledding. And so you know, that was something that people seemed to be really kind of rally behind. So kind of being aware of the informal ways the park is used. With that said, I'll quickly walk you through the 3 concepts. So in each concept, there are themes that exist in all of them. We've tried to expand the pathway network so it's longer. That we have made a larger playground area for the purposes of each of these concepts. They're roughly the same size. And each one contains a restroom / shelter and some sort of lookout with a pond. So this first concept here is a riff on what's currently existing. The pathways largely follow the existing pathway system. Where they do diverge, like over here, we are kind of swerving them around to make up grades such that they are less than a 5% slope, such that they're accessible. That's also true as we kind of sweep the pathway down here. In this case, that we're proposing that the playground roughly exists in the same location, with the addition of kind of a central plaza space that includes a combined shelter / restroom. The current restroom is kind of over here, but we want to move closer to the pond.
Sorry.
Sorry, thank you. We wanted to move the current shelter closer to the pond, to provide that connection to the pond, such that when people are having a get together or a party, they're actually, you know, kind of overlooking the pond and they're more directly connected to it. Yeah, and so here are just some ideas of what the different elements could be, just in terms of like a combined, in this situation where you suggested a combined shelter / restroom. There could be at the entry to the park, some sort of walls and with kind of I guess I'm gonna go back. I forgot to mention that the existing lookout's over here, but we're kind of suggesting we move it a little bit away from the road and maybe make it a little bit larger. And so this is just an example of the kind of structure that we could have. And then in the plaza area, kind of rather than maybe a sports court, there's room for smaller scale sports, so like ping pong or some chess tables. Moving on to option 2. In this option, we wanted to take a look at providing this sports court. And so what we've done is we're actually suggesting that we could take this edge of the park here and raise up the grades a little bit to create a flatter space where we could kind of have an open lawn that's just super flexible, as well as this, we show it as a half basketball court. It did come up yesterday that with the half basketball court being put in so close, maybe the space could be something that's more kind of flexible, hardscape surface that maybe isn't defined by a single particular sport. But regardless, it kind of provides this space for it. We kind of balance that with a shelter and restroom that's at a prominent point in the park, so that the people who are meeting for parties or what have you, the shelter will be really prominent and easy to find. In this case, we're suggesting that the playground shift a bit, just to provide a bit of separation from the shelter, just shifted to the north a little bit from where we had in the last option. And then in this option for the pathway network, we're suggesting that we divert from the existing pathway system network just a little bit more to create a longer pathway network. So we're pushing it that south, suggesting we put in a new pedestrian bridge over the little wetland stream over here. As well, just one other feature, we're suggesting a kind of smaller scale pond outlook that could kind of exist along the pathway network, just as kind of a serene place to sit.
The covered seating.
Oh, right. Thank you. I keep leaving out the coolest part, which is the lookout. So in this case, something that was quite popular was the idea of enhancing the lookout. In this case, we're suggesting that it could be kind of a covered structure right on the edge of the water. It could be something that's used all year round. So, and on that note, this is an image that was quite popular at the public open house. So just something that could be covered. They could have picnics at, just kind of really have use it any time of the year. And so just some other images of kind of flat lawn space with the sports court. Maybe we do something that's kind of creative with paint. In one of the things that we want to do for each of the options is make sure there was plenty of seating for parents around the playground. So we could imagine that it could be some sort of long linear seating, providing plenty of opportunities. And then moving on to option 3. In this case, we wanted to provide an option that is really kind of playful with the pathways, that is a bit more dynamic. And that really kind of plays into the nature theme. So we're suggesting pathways that kind of weave in and out throughout the planting, kind of weave through the wetland planting area, and create a somewhat larger pathway network. We have a kind of a central circuit that goes around the pond, with a new leg down. Oh, oops. There we go. With new entrances out to Williams Avenue. But in this case, we're also suggesting a pond pathway, which we're imagining could be a smaller pathway. Maybe it's like a decomposed granite or something that has a different feel, something that's more natural. And so this way you could kind of get down to the pond, and there could be a natural stone put along the path and along the edge of the pond, just to kind of provide some informal seating. In this concept as well, we're suggesting that the playground area could maybe go along the edge of the 50-foot planting buffer, and maybe even, we could get playful and put some stones that maybe aren't informal for children to climb down there. In this instance, we wanted to provide an option where the shelter and the restroom were individual items. And so in order to provide a bit of separation from the playground, we proposed it along this pathway, imagining that people would park on Williams Street, Williams Avenue, and have a clear path up to be able to bring their equipment. The restroom we'd imagine to be a two-room restroom building, and we placed it over by the picnic area. For the for the pond lookout, we wanted to test out another area, and so we're suggesting that it could be kind of along the north edge take a different form and kind of be half covered, half not. So, and it could kind of be a bridge between the kind of informal pathway and the primary park pathway. And so here are some additional images, an idea of this park shelter as kind of a standalone item, and with a restroom as a standalone item as well. This pond lookout it's an idea of kind of the form it could take. However, we could imagine that we would add some sort of cover above that. And then as well, kind of bringing in this idea of just some stone seating in the kind of wetland buffer area, just to provide these kind of informal areas. And then finally, this image down here just kind of begins to get at the curvilinear pathway network that we proposed.
Is that 3 separate trails there?
This is 3 separate trails in this situation. There's a running trail that's like decomposed granite. I believe this one's asphalt, and this is similar material. But, yeah. Yeah, and so I think the feedback we received from the Parks Board was that they liked elements of, certain options and certain elements of other options. And really, I think the goal of this process is not necessarily to say, hey, we want number 3, but to be like, okay, we like the framework of number 3, but hey, we really like what you're doing with the lookout on option 2. And so I think that kind of, we got the feedback that the pathway network in option 3 was quite popular. But that, there was some question, could we fit the sports board in using that, using that path network, so.
I agree that there's a sports court going to be coming in close by, but.
Yeah, I agree with that too, like, as a parent of 5 kids, if you put decomposed granite on that path, there will be handfuls of it in the bottom of the pond by the time, literally, we're gonna have to replace that every year, if not sooner. So throwing rocks in a pond, especially when it's that close, feels like that's just gonna, that's where that granite's going. So, I would say, I like the paths, but it's gotta be kind of more solid.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying it has to be asphalt, it just can't be little pebbles that make good splashes, so.
Absolutely love the paths. I think that's brilliant. The sport court, I think I agree with what I've heard already, that it's probably not the right place for it. And then somebody texted me that the balls will be bouncing down the hill.
Yeah,
So that could be a definite.
that came up last night too.
And then, will the current playground equipment stay, or will it be new?
Thank you. I forgot to mention that in each of these in situations, we've proposed that the playground equipment would be removed. Now, obviously, it depends on the kind of the timeline of the implementation of this project. The current equipment, I believe, is 11 years old. And so it's not yet to its design life. However, depending on how long implementation takes, it will get there. Now, I will say that option 1, just as an example, could accommodate not moving the structures. So it's technically feasible to move them, but
The life cycle of the structure?
well, I believe it's typically on the order of 15 years.
15 to 20 years, we usually change them out about 18.
Is it something the manufacturer tells us or just our experience?
Just the experience. A lot of times you can't get parts for them. Just depending on the grades.
And
I'm
along
asking-
this, oh, go
Well,
ahead.
I was asking the question, sorry, just to finish my thought, it's because the equipment at this park was actually sponsored in part or mostly by the Rotary Club of Sherwood. So I'm wondering if there's a way that maybe we could be involved in this project again in some capacity if that equipment is indeed one of them. Because that was where we chose to put our big money project for the Rotary Club is in the Murdoch Park.
And a neighboring question on that, though, it's been a while since I've been to the Lookout. All of three of these say that you're moving it. Is the current pond overlook in need of replacement?
It's,
Or is it?
well, there's been some maintenance
Or-
completed on it in the last couple of years.
Last 5 years.
Yeah, the last 5 years, and so, it's currently in a state of good repair. It's,
Cause I mean, I would even be in favor, I love, the idea of coverage and everything else, but it's almost like, why would you take away something
Yeah.
that could act as another area for gathering? Just to replace it with another one that's a little bit around, rather than just say, hey, we're gonna put a covered overlook, that's over here or something.
You're saying why get rid of it?
Yeah, well,
Just
yeah.
leave the existing one.
Leave the existing one and put a bench on it. If it's safe, why take away? Unless you said, yeah, it's falling in and we're gonna have to, anyway.
I also would question changing out playground equipment that's not at its, still has useful life, that seems like not a smart use of funds, but I can also see the community saying, you did all this work to the park, but you didn't change out the playground. I know that would probably come too, but that's a lot of money. Playground equipment's a lot of money.
Or we may be able to do a phased approach, right? And
Yeah.
do a few at the restroom or the picnic
Yeah.
shelter combo, and then at the playground later when it needs to be replaced.
Call it Butterfly Pond.
Yeah,
It does look like butterfly.
You're right.
Well, that'll play in if we do a lot of those, wetland flower
Uh-huh,
things around the edge, cause
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll attract more.
I love the sitting, the rocks that people can sit on.
I do too. I actually kind of even like the stone looking ping pong thingy. Although that would be a nightmare to try to keep ping pongs there.
People that.
I think people bring their own.
Same with the chessboard.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, the chessboards, I mean, you can always just use them for eating lunch on as well, right?
True.
Same with, and so. And again, I know we're not New York City, but I do know when we were walking through New York City, the ping pong tables were in pretty solid use, every park we went to, yeah.
Oh, really?
And so, yeah, I was
Well, that's
surprised, but it was, again, they have way more people and all the other stuff, but I was like, yeah, I could see some kids sitting.
Options.
Right, but I also could see, like, for me as a kid, like, we'd play ping pong at this one kid's house, but what if I didn't have a friend that had a ping pong table, right? It would have been cool to,
It's something different. We don't
Yeah.
have that anywhere else.
yeah.
We talked about that in the context of the sport court too, right? Like, there's basketball, obviously basketball is gonna be nearby. It's already at Snyder. Also, half the houses in Sherwood have a basketball hoop in front of them.
And every
right?
school
Like-
grounds and every.
Like, there's a lot of things that, whether they're in the sport court realm or the other parks realm list of amenities that you can't, like, we don't have, and it's not feasible for people to have at home, right? So I love basketball, but basketball's pretty widely accessible already.
Yeah.
Do any of these plans preserve existing trails? I'm thinking cost now, because if you completely relocate it, you gotta tear it out and reinstall it.
So, option one does in a certain amount. It kind of along this edge here and, a bit in here. As soon as we started doing work, I guess some of the problem with the existing path in this area is it wasn't accessible, and so some sort of revision would be required. The same thing is true of the existing path that kind of goes between the trees, that's actually the most problematic area in terms of, if we leave it, it's far from being accessible, so.
Well, yeah, and I got that. I was just curious if, you always have to ask about cost too.
Oh, totally. Yeah, but that was the mentality, so we did move for the most part of paths in these options.
And then I don't know if this is a question for you or you, but if there's, are there maintenance problems currently with this park that are being addressed by this at all? Like I know at, Snyder Park, there's flooding and there's some other weird things that happen kind of constantly. Are there things with this park that you're like, yeah, I wish we would have addressed this when we created it, but now
No, not at this time. There are
Okay.
some large cottonwood trees that continue to pose hazards to the public that are out there that may take care of those.
Okay,
Non-native volunteer trees.
yeah,
But as far as the flooding issue, there's large grade. A point there, and that is the detention part of the pond,
okay.
and then it drains out that grade down to the rest of the.
You know, there are other places that are like always muddy or ever, you know what I mean, where there is a gathering water or anything. Again, it's been a while since.
It flows nicely,
Okay.
it comes down through this kind of this strip on the one corner into the pond. That's fairly confined. The one maintenance issue that we do have is the culvert that is there now, the bottom of it is rotten out. So that's where we would have a trail, a bridge over the top of that. Free up that entire area, so it wasn't confined to that area there.
Right.
But minimal maintenance associated with.
Sharon and I hike Pirate Point there every year in December October, we get a lot of rain and I remember it being soggy or wet or pretty good shape.
One call out when the sledding is the option 2 there would eliminate the sled hill. That is used in the winter.
In option 3, how big is that shelter? Like, it's like, is it comparable to the one at Stella Olson?
I'm not familiar with the one at Stella Olson, but it's similar size to what is currently there. I wanna say it's like 20 by 40, something like that. Yeah.
Like the truck park.
Like what?
Like the truck park.
Truck
Oh,
park, yeah. I like Pinehurst, yeah. And I do like the idea of another gathering area, even unofficial over, you know, on the wood side on the pond, right? I feel like, again, giving you know, being able to have 2 birthday parties at the park. The one thing I don't love about, let's see, the second one as well, is those are existing trees from the covered area. I can't really see the playground as well. Yeah, it feels like there's things that would be blocking me that I would prefer to have. I really like the placement of one where I can see the water and I can see the playground from the covered area. The lazy parent where I just want to be able to.
Yeah, I think it does double duty, like you said. It also can become it's a second access, a second lookout onto the pond, right? So you got 2 lookouts onto the pond. You could potentially even make the pond lookout covered, even in option 1, right? And you bring that over because that was very popular. In theory, you could make that the pond lookout also reservable, right? So you have 2 reservable spaces in the park yeah, so I think that those are the things I like about that a lot. I think, but the secondary trail in option 3, I know was very popular.
Well, then you could put a secondary, couldn't you put a secondary trail?
And that's what we talked about last night at Parks was basically blending these and getting the best of all worlds.
Yeah, I like the additional trails as well. And the sports court feels out of place for this park.
So I want to make sure we have time for the other works for Eric's presentation.
They need.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. Do you need any, what are you looking for from us? Just as general input, you know, take that back to Parks Board and then come back with a recommendation at this point?
Yeah, so the next steps are, we're taking the feedback that we've received from you and we've received from Parks Board. Might make some minor revisions to these plans, but then we're taking them back to the public. And they're gonna be provided with a survey where we're gonna kind of parse out the elements that everybody likes. And we're gonna then take that information and come with a preferred option, which will then again be going back through Parks Board. Going back to talk to you guys and then taking to the public one last time.
When do price tags get attached to it though? Because I mean. Yeah, I'd vote for the one to have everything, you know what I mean? Like, they're gonna come back and say, well, we want this one, and we'll say, well, we can only afford this.
Yeah,
That's the problem with a lot of these processes.
Right.
You don't talk about price till the end. I mean, I'd love to see a system where you put a value on everything and just give everyone $100 budget.
Right.
And have them pick and choose, but
Right.
I think at this point in the game, it's pretty tough out there.
Uncovered lookout costs this, covered lookout costs that. Shelter costs this, playground costs that.
Yeah.
And the
Okay.
next portion we are planning on doing online, but as Brett mentioned, people will be able to say, I like this from number one, I like this from number
Yeah.
two, instead of just picking a
So
one,
it's
two,
à la
and
carte.
three. Yeah.
Alright.
And gather some feedback. Come back.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Awesome.
Look forward to seeing this progress. I know the community is excited, so thank you.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Eric
And Bruce.
and Bruce. And that doesn't say Bruce on here.
It's okay.
No talking.
I won't say a word. I won't say a word. That's typical.
All right, Eric.
Thanks. We probably don't need 30 minutes, but happy to take the time if we need it. My better professional half here, Bruce. You got my check. Yeah. All right, so we're here to talk about one of our council goals for next fiscal year 24-25, which is development code audit to promote stronger economic development. There we go. There's the council goal. So we have a proposal. The purpose of this work session is just to get feedback from you guys on the scope. I think we have a lot of council goals and there's not a lot of detail in there. So staff has an idea of what we're going for, but we just want to confirm that before we actually embark on implementing the council goal.
Go back to the goal in real quick.
The goal is improve development code to promote stronger economic development. So
You're probably gonna get to this, so just tell me, be quiet, but did you talk about what that means? How are we defining stronger economic development? Yeah, I think that's an important part of the conversation.
absolutely. So I think off the top, it's not something I've thought a lot about, to be honest, but I think off the top, it would be we have targeted industries, right? So how do we ensure or get the best opportunity to get those targeted industries? Timeliness of development, I think is another one. How do we speed up development to expand the tax base as we want to, would probably be the top two. Bruce, anything?
I was gonna say that talking about the latter, I mean, I think there's a strong realization by staff that there really aren't incentives, other than trying, I'm gonna cough, I'm sorry. There's not strong incentives in Oregon or really in the cities in Oregon to encourage business growth. So in reality, one of the great things that we can do as a city and as a staff is to try to expedite the process, because time is really money. And the longer things take, the less there's an opportunity for investment. Plus, there are economic cycles, and in many cases, developers and businesses want to be aware that the cycle can change. And we've seen now high interest rates. We're seeing less leasing as a result of high interest rates. So things that can happen faster can often be best in terms of timing for economic cycles.
I think I'd be interested in hearing everyone's thoughts on this. I think it's an important part of the conversation. There are developers out there that just want to be able to build warehouse space.
Yeah.
It's not something we necessarily want to have. So, when we think about bringing jobs to Sherwood, that jobs that can afford the housing in Sherwood, making sure that we're doing what we can to encourage those industries and discourage the type of development we don't want. We've had.
And a lot of that is done verbally with developers, but we can't force that to happen in a sense. And one of the things that I think
Well, we could have.
We can.
It says no warehouse, I'm not proposing this.
No, I know.
We have code
I was
that says
gonna,
no warehouse.
I want to get to that.
Yeah.
Because I think we all know that it's because of the flexible code that we have in Sherwood that it's caused investment here versus in some unnamed other cities. And the reality is that there are some cities that have had manufacturing only codes and land has sat for a long time. And so I think there has to be some kind of a balance, and I'm not sure what that balance is at this stage. But I think that's something that certainly has to be thought about in terms of a process.
We do it the other way where we say, okay, we'll do incentives, you know, by speeding it up, but for the first one of this type of business. You know what I mean? Like, so that we're just, we're not saying you can't come here. It's just, you know, we don't need, you know, 5 of that particular type of business. We would kind of like to incentivize 1 or 2.
Well, I think there's two different aspects to this. One is the development itself, because you don't know all the buildings in the Tualatin Sherwood Corporate Park, which is that project. They were funded by Modlo, and Modlo means, if you look it up, modern logistics. But in reality, because the market here seems to be stronger in the South I-5 corridor, which we're a part for manufacturing, most of this is turned into manufacturing. The one exception is that Lamb building, but that's in support of the entire semiconductor operation that Lamb has. So and that'll become the regional logistics center for Lamb, from what we understand. So, no, it's not actually that building, I'm sorry. Where is it? No, that's DW Fritz.
Yeah.
So in some ways, we're fortunate to be in this market rather than the east side market, over by Gresham, where you have a tremendous amount of warehousing going on near the airport, in essence. But the reality is, I guess any of these buildings could have turned into warehouse buildings. I mean, that's certainly possible.
Okay. Renee, Dan? If you guys have thoughts on that.
I mean, I agree with what you say. I think the other thing I'd be looking for in code audits is are there massive red tape like that we can clear out, right, through some streamlining. I think it goes up to kind of goes along with expediting, but I also want to make sure that we're looking at the areas where we can hone toward the outcomes we're looking for, you know, but not be too prescriptive, right, where we eliminate opportunities too. So it's
Yeah.
that balance that Bruce talked about.
Yeah. And I think, you know, we have TS Corporate, the big developments in the Tonkin employment area with TS Corporate, which very high success rate in our targeted industries. We have Sherwood Commerce Center coming online now. So far, you know, relatively few leases confirmed. It's about split right now between manufacturing and warehousing, wholesale. We just approved Panattoni, which they do focus on logistics mainly, but I think it's to be determined what that looks like. So I think we're really early in the Tonkin employment area. Like we're in this weird spot where we have a lot of development happening, but we're really close to figuring out what those tenants are gonna be. We just haven't gotten there yet. So part of this could be an audit of what the uses we're actually getting there. We can come back and tell you percentages. Hey, we're at 50-50 right now in the Tonkin employment area. Is this meeting our target? Or do we need to look at potential restrictions in certain areas?
And I think going back and looking at the wins so far and saying, are these actually providing the type of jobs that we were hoping for, right? You know, because you could have, when I think of manufacturing, I think of Laverne and Shirley and the gloves going down the assembly line. You know, those are probably minimum wage manufacturing jobs, right? So we're getting, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if you look-
Advanced manufacturing,
Yeah.
it's obviously different, but.
Right.
But even with manufacturing, are we getting the outcomes we're looking for?
Well, and those kind of jobs also, they do balance the tax base, but they don't really provide, you know, vibe of the city or anything like. Is this also to address like the small business incentives or anything like that, that a butcher downtown or, you know, would impact, oh, this makes Sherwood feel more, you know, homey or like a, you know what I mean?
I think that's probably more in the Old Town strategic
Okay,
plan
okay, so
process.
that's,
rather
so
than
that'll be
this.
separate.
Yeah.
This is about the high paying jobs, balancing the tax base and kind of the large swaths of the land. And then we'll do another incentive thing for the,
That's how we recommended broaching.
That would be our
okay,
thought as to how it might proceed the best.
Yeah, this is gonna become a big project.
yeah, I can separate that.
Yeah.
Okay.
To respond to your question, my thoughts would be if there's a way to incentivize living wage jobs, whatever that might be, and not the warehousing.
I mean, we do have a URA that we can create, carrots with. Right, like SDC offsets, you know, for certain types of businesses and stuff, something we can consider.
If we did that, then that also helps the tax, offsetting the tax base.
Yeah, but one thing, I think there's a lot of options. I think I like those ideas. I think that's exactly what we'll get at through this code audit is, you know, I can tell you right now, there's no incentive in terms of land use procedures, you know, building permit review for certain industries. You know, we know internally, and we're paying attention to it, get these permits out the door. But, you know, and we'd want probably legal counsel to weigh in on this as well. Can we do a fast track land use review for certain types of industries? Can we have our third, and I'll get to this in a second, but have our third party reviewer or our in-house reviewer, if we hire one, prioritize those projects over others. I mean, it likely will come at somewhat of a cost if we take that approach to general commercial. But I think there's things that we can do non-financially that are just, you know, programmatically that are gonna incentivize certain industries, in addition to the URA.
Okay, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, that's a big decision, but don't take it off the table.
I think in the URA, we do actually list that as an item, SDC, something related to SDC.
Yeah, I think-
targeted industry.
I think that would probably have more of an impact, the SDCs, to entice certain kinds of business to come here and advertise that, market that, make sure the developers are aware that there could be a benefit to them if they bring in the right kinds of companies, rather than mandating, you know, just manufacturing or something of that sort, which could scare off the institutional capital, which is the basis for all of this happening.
They want to have that flexibility where maybe part of the site would be manufacturing, but part might be warehousing, and maybe that's in support of the manufacturing, and they need to have both.
Yeah, and very often manufacturing, like if you look at some companies without naming any names that are in that particular park, a semiconductor company that's in there, not Lam. You can see that what they're doing is they have R&D, they have engineering, they have, you know, they have the manufacturing, the advanced manufacturing side, but they also include distribution, because that's all integral to the manufacturing process. So I think one of the issues is really a building which is totally perhaps distribution versus a company that it's part of, you know, getting the product out of there so they can sell it. Sure. You know?
When we say warehousing, would that would like more storage facilities could fall under that?
Mini storage, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, mini storage, no.
No, yeah, we don't
Mini
allow
storage.
that.
totally
in the
separate.
zones.
Yeah, we wouldn't allow mini storage.
Okay.
It'd be very easy to use up space.
That's what I was
Yeah.
trying to avoid.
I definitely think there's something to the STC offset idea. I like the carrot versus the stick approach a little bit better, and if you tie it to either the certain. I like the idea of tying it to what you said, where it's, these are the industries we're trying to attract. If we can do this legally, if you're one of these industries, you get some offsets. If you're not, you don't.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of.
And you do market that, and you tell the developers up front because they're real interested in SDCs. I mean, we're real interested in SDCs because it pays for things, but the reality is that's one of the number one discussion points with developers. How do you get credits on your SDCs and you know, that kind of thing? And if that can be an incentive, a financial incentive, that could, you don't know, but that could be a factor that they were willing to consider. Depends on the strength of the leasing market. Right now, the leasing market is not good. It's slowed down a lot. And so they're just trying to fill space because they got their expenses. But that could be a factor that could really at least help push that ball along.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just wondering if, I mean, I like the idea of STCs on one hand. On the other hand, we rely on those STCs, right? For the city. I wonder if some analysis could be done that, okay, if we're given X in STCs because we know we're gonna get Y in this, property taxes or whatever benefit that particular industry would bring to the city to make sure we're not,
No, that might be a little,
it
because
could
you don't get the property tax till.
be a year and a half later, yeah. But I mean, in the future,
could
we would
project
know
it
in
out
the future
somehow.
what it would be.
Yeah.
So what are we giving up to gain what?
Right, yeah, because theoretically, with the advanced manufacturing and those family wage jobs, Renee mentioned, you're gonna have more infrastructure in that building, whether it's gigantic CNC machines or whatever, that's gonna drive property. tax.
That's the key, is really to get, I was at a aerospace semiconductor company yesterday on the with the CTE program. This was in another city, and the kinds of machines that they had is obviously the kind of thing that's gonna produce a lot of revenue for the city. Plus, you have to have very talented workforce, technical workforce that can understand how to work those machines. And so to me, that's the ideal kind of manufacturing we should try to attract here.
The other thing, and this may not be possible, but Wilsonville has they were doing that program for years, where they set up these little ED zones on a lot by lot basis. And it'd be really interesting to learn what they're doing over there and how that's working.
Somebody who worked over.
I think the early version didn't work too well, and they revised it, and I haven't heard the results of that. But that's where they used tax increment financing. And apparently I guess it didn't count against their 25% geographical limit in terms of how much of the city could go into a URA, but I don't think we know that. That's gonna require more research. Yeah.
Paul, yeah,
Can I say one thing? The Sherwood 2040 comprehensive plan under the healthy and valued ecosystems. Policy 4.11 states that provide incentives and flexibility to the development community for the preservation of resources that are above and beyond code requirements. I would like to consider having that as part of this relook as well, as far as environmental incentives for the sites that we're building.
Really have to cut all those trees down.
Exactly.
Convenience or, yeah, I agree.
Because we like Sherwood because of the natural resources, and especially in Sherwood West, where it's all natural resources essentially. Like, is there a way to incentivize the developers to preserve some of that or incorporate that into the design standards?
Well, to that point, because now there's been a public meeting, so we can talk about it, but, we suspect Costco is gonna do an application. It would be great if they would, preserve all those trees along the road, for instance. Sure. As part of that process. Bruce, you look surprised, but they had a neighborhood meeting, so we can talk about.
Well, it's coming up.
Upcoming.
Yeah.
I mean, the light's around, it's all.
I've been very careful not to use that word, but I know it's now.
It's in the public.
Yeah, clearly.
Just at a very basic level, I like all these ideas. I think they're all good and we can explore all of them. I want to be a little mindful about the scope, and this is exactly why we're having this conversation, right? So we're talking about URA, this council goal, and I'm totally open to expanding the scope. And I think if that's what's needed to meet what our goals are, let's do it. The development code is a pretty narrow, it's the development code is pretty narrow. Well, what are the allowed uses? What are the process for getting a land use approval? But if we need to expand that and potentially include this work with some of the other council goals around dev or a relook to the URA, then we can do that.
Well, my take is if we have two goals that are looking at code and we can handle that as one project, that seems like it's where fishing is.
Yes, let Bruce and I can look at the council goals holistically and see if we can marry some of these to maybe bring into a bigger project.
Can I make one? On because you said something, just to make sure, my suggestion about doing URA or doing an SDC offsets, that would have the URA replace those funds.
Yeah.
Not a give it away.
That's how it's commonly done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To some degree.
And I feel like you could marry it with Dan's suggestions, you know, there can be SDC offsets for, hey, you keep 90% of the trees, we'll knock your SDCs down by X amount, you know what I mean? To incentivize them, hey, look at your designs and see if you can incorporate some of these things to hang on to the trees. You'll make money, we'll keep our trees.
Can there be some requirement of that anyway, since that's in our comprehensive plan?
Yeah, I mean, the planning commission does, well, clear and objective standards. No, that's only for housing. So yeah, I mean, the planning commission would actually have discretion on tree protection. I agree with you there hasn't been so far a lot of tree protection in the Tonkin employment area. TS Corporate had a wetland on their property, and so there's much more incentive and regulation over the wetland. That's why you get that coming down to TS Road. Yeah,
So when we talk about clear and objective standards.
wouldn't apply to industrial.
Right, well, but on top of that, if you have an incentive program, we would get much more kind of, say, right? You don't have to have a clear and objective standard for an incentive program, is that correct? I think that's right.
Okay. Absolutely. Good.
So, you know, maybe one of the areas where it could fit, maybe it's not the development code, maybe it's some other code, but the SDCs, in a sense, are in some code, right? So maybe whatever code that they're in, you do include the incentives as part of that code provision. I mean, I don't know if that's the correct way to do it, but
Do the incentives need to be in the code, or can they be a program we adopt?
That was what I was getting at, is the development code
Could
is
be
pretty
program,
narrow. I mean,
yeah.
you could reference it, and it probably could be in the development code, but I don't know that it has to be. My hunch is that you
Yeah.
actually.
Program or offering at the time or something.
Yeah, so we need to
We're not gonna Update our code then.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I like that better.
I think, you know, process, we could probably do fast track, you know, land use review, that should be in the development code, you need that to sort of defend your decisions, your hearing process and decisions. But kind of at a very basic level, you know, we can and should look at what are our allowed uses, conditional uses, prohibited uses in the commercial land use zone, industrial zones. I'm gonna throw a word out here, and I think we probably don't have time to get into it, but it's something that Bruce and I have talked about, and we want this decision to be made by city council and not by staff or planning commission. We get requested inquiries on data centers, and this is a policy decision that we want you guys to make.
because there's a balance between, they don't produce jobs, we know that, and they don't produce traffic. The reason cities want them, particularly in Oregon, is because there's a revenue stream that comes to the city. So that's a decision, it's not for us to make, obviously,
We get a lot of requests for it,
What is
and
it, a revenue stream?
because there's tremendous amount of
Personal property,
equipment in
yeah.
those buildings. And so cities go after that, just like in California, they go after car dealerships because it's a revenue stream, or they go after Costco's because it's a revenue stream.
They're building a lot of them in Central Oregon, it's because of the massive, it's because they require a lot of HVAC.
Right.
To keep that equipment cool, so.
Even
It makes more
city
sense to
and-
put it
yeah.
out on the site.
Mm.
Than bring them here.
The only other thing I would say, like, I might be open to it if we had a tech park that's like, you know, hey, we've got the infrastructure and all that built out, but it wouldn't be large data centers because,
That's the question.
yeah, because even
That's the
that,
question.
I don't know that we're a great site for that because of electricity costs, right? Put it on the Dalles because they get cheap electricity.
What sometimes these companies want is they don't want to be totally dependent upon the utility. They want to have a data center that serves their particular facility and, you know, sometimes that's what the larger companies are looking for, these tech companies.
Well, and
I don't know a lot about this. We're not experts.
Right, but I would say a minor data center, especially with Sherwood Broadband, if they have to sign up for with us. If we can.
I think it's smart to get a policy around this because
Yes.
with AI.
We need to
They're gonna
know.
be,
Yeah.
data centers are gonna be popping up like.
And they are a heavy user of electricity.
But do we all, is Carl allow them, not allow them? Don't speak to it. What's the?
100% silent on data centers, and that's where we do get requests, and I answer I basically say it's not in the code, and I really don't want to make that call, and I really don't want planning commission to make that call if our hand is forced through a land use application. I'd rather get it to you guys first and get some clear direction from you guys. So I know it's a hot topic, so hopefully we can move on, and I think
In a work session.
I've just given you guys a heads up. It might be, that's an example of something we would address through this code.
Just, and talking anecdotally, talking to some of my peers out in central and eastern Oregon, there's regret.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Data centers in, yeah, it's been more problem than it's been worth.
Yeah, and so I think it should be good to have that discussion and have you guys as a policy board make that call.
Leave it on our shoulder. Thanks, Aaron.
With a lot of input from staff.
We can get some guidance. from policy.
Yes. Yep. And then kind of down here at the bottom, parks, trees, open space, wetland habitat, natural areas, to Dan's point. Hopefully there's win-wins here. There could be trade-offs, and if we can find the win-wins, that's great. Find a program that really makes sense for both tree protection and job creation.
And we're doing it with buffers.
Yeah.
To that.
Yep. That would be, just tied into the wetland. So just really quickly, the steps. So I see this as a staff, depending on the final scope, I see this as a staff-led project. We'd have to use a consultant. I think we can get this done with staff. So we just basically go top to bottom in the code, what needs to be updated. We have a lot of ideas already. You guys are giving us ideas. We will review our comparable cities for economic development, Wilsonville, Tualatin, Hillsborough. We kind of have our other cities that we're eyeing that are competitors, if you will, and we can see if there's some good ideas there that we can bring into our code.
Greenville has got a big win.
They did, a chocolate company.
Yeah.
A chocolate company.
Yeah, I believe that was.
Sleep at the wheel.
No.
Chocolate company here.
We haven't.
Okay.
We understand there were some discussions about it here. I don't know the whole deal. But it was obviously something already in McMinnville
Okay.
and something, I think the Belgian government had some involvement in that. But yes.
Well, I only bring it up, so let's learn from the successes of our neighbors.
Absolutely, or things that are failures.
Right, exactly.
And then, of course, I think we have to bring the private sector into this, recent developers, architects, design professionals that know our code, know other codes, and interview them, and see what they're thinking.
As part of that, obviously, we have partners, great partners we've been working with. We should be talking to them.
Absolutely.
Are there other developers that are more in tune with some of the types of projects we want that we should be including in the conversation as well?
Yeah, actually, I was gonna say, what are the
Going
ones?
and asking them, why aren't you talking to us?
Yeah, I was gonna say, ask the ones that have walked away.
I mean, the reality is that. I mean, we're working with 3 developers now, and they're all a little different. One built what could have become distribution, but put in a lot of manufacturing in there. Another is building smaller spaces, generally speaking. There's some benefits to that. I mean, the question is, who are those developers that only focus, for example, on advanced manufacturing? I don't know that they exist in this market. The reality, because the whole thing depends on getting institutional capital or where house is going to get built. I mean, these projects take a phenomenal amount of capital, risk capital, because they're building spec. And it seems as if the market is not into so much build to suits, which is a lot of what happened in Tualatin over the years were build to suits. The market doesn't seem to be favorable towards that. They're looking towards more institutional investment than individual companies buying parcels. Most of these developers they want to own the properties and they want to lease. Those are the kinds of developers, that we're seeing in Sherwood.
It's of income.
It's income, it's passive income, it's pension funds, big pension funds, Canadian pension funds are investing in this, firms like Carlyle are big investors. They were a big investor in
I
Sherwood.
think your analysis is spot on. I was thinking more of like, I have to believe there are, for instance, like Robinson Construction. I'm not recommending this, another Target, but like they build all the Target stores. I mean, there are some companies out there that
Build only certain things.
only certain things, are we talking to some of those, like who builds the fab plants for Intel?
We know who builds the fab plants. And we've talked with them, we've had them in for tours, you know, that kind of
Over
thing.
200 acres.
Yeah, in fact, that was part of that. Yeah, that's correct. That was part of a tour. Without getting into detail, the folks that are building the Intel facilities, without naming who that contractor or that is, went up to them at a meeting, and said, we'd like to have you look at Sherwood, gave them a tour. Now, whether they're gonna be interested, we don't know, because we can't really control who ties up land to the same extent.
Sure.
You know, but yeah,
It's good to get those conversations going.
we're definitely telling every developer that we want advanced manufacturing, including the conversation today.
I'm gonna just really quickly, we're short on time. The other thing we'll be doing internally, potentially actually incorporating it into this as well. The building and planning department will be going fully electronic in 2025, which is great. It is state mandate.
It's the contract.
We are, that's set up.
That's all right. That's a good thought.
Yeah, so I think that's really gonna help streamline, if we can bring some of this into that, that's great. And then I think the other thing we can do is get a commercial plans examiner in-house. Hire that person, make a really good effort there, or actually strike a better contract with a third party plan reviewer and put them under the gun a little bit in terms of plan review timelines. So all that should come together pretty nicely, I think, in 2025. And we're short on time, but happy to take any other feedback you guys have.
Any other questions? Good.
Been given to you along the way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing this progress. We will, let's start in 5 minutes. Deliver a meeting.
What do you want me to call that?
Getting out of here.